Hello, Claude Dupuis, Canterbury Turnings. We're here at my shop. Obviously, this is not the shop, but we're starting. My shop's upstairs on the second floor of this two-stall garage. And we're starting down here because there's a couple things I want to show you. And one is the compressor that is obvious there in the corner. And my dust collection system, which is in the corner over there. But if you scan up to the ceiling, you'll see all the branches to my dust collection. And you notice all the fittings 45 into the trunk. So there are no 90-degree turns. There are 90s that turn up into the ceiling, but there are long sweeps to avoid any clogging of the dust. And I've got wood drying on top of the racks there. We have some bowl blanks getting ready for the lathe. I've got plastic over them to keep them from drying out and cracking until I can get to them. Now the dust collector is behind this insulation here, and it is insulated because I have return air that goes into the shop. Now in the summer, I take that insulation off, and the return air, or it's really what the exhaust air, actually just exhausts through the garage. But in the winter, where I heat my shop, I have to have that return air, exhaust air, if you will, clean air, back in the shop and circulates through, and I don't lose all the heat. So coming back around to the lathe, a Powermatic lathe. I've got an extended bed on it, which is great when I'm turning. Probably should oil that. When I'm turning and I've got the tailstock up and I've got something I'm turning, I want to pull the tailstock away, I don't have to pick it up and remove it. I just slide it back. And I've got a tool on my tool caddy right here, so that when I slide that back, I just swap positions with my tool caddy. And I've got this little foam thing. Of course, you get some sawdust on there. And this is my tool cabinet, so that you can lay tools on there that aren't going to slide around. And so I've got tools hanging on the doors. I've got tools on both doors. And then I've got a little rack up here for different drill bits. These drill bits are made for the pepper mills, different sizes, and spur drives, obviously, and what have you. Some original turning tools that I think my dad had a set of Craftsman tools. That's where these came from. A couple of new tools, a couple old tools, and some storage underneath. So this opens up to more tools underneath. And I got tools hanging on the side there. And you can see that this is built into the slope of the roof at a 45-degree angle. And then I've got drawers with pen turning stuff in here, more pen turning stuff in there. Tools down below, more tools there. Up here, I keep, pardon the mess, but this stuff doesn't wash off anymore. And this is right in the line of fire from the lathe. But you get the oils and what have you from the bowls, and stuff just doesn't wash off. This is where I keep my sanding stuff. I do power sand, pneumatic. So I keep that up in here. Never been quite this organized. I knew you guys were coming. Down below, I've got another cabinet built into this slope. And when I first started turning, not knowing any better, I thought maybe that, the way to sharpen was going to be with, what do you call these again? The Tormac. Thank you, Jim. A Tormac. And I thought Tormac would be the way to go, but as I learned and went along, it turns out that's not the quickest way. But the Tormac does work great for sharpening planer blades, jointer blades, and those kinds of tools. I do use that for that. I got power in this cabinet, a light in this cabinet. I really thought it was going to be used for sharpening. And I do keep some adhesives and honing things in here, so it's pretty well equipped. Some drawers back there with more of the Tormac tools, that all the gadgets that go with it, you know, the gizmos and stuff for sharpening. I've got dryer sheets here that I use to wipe down my shield. So this is a used dryer sheet. And I kind of just wipe my shield down, and it's anti-static. So it keeps the dust from building up on your shield. And yeah, it still builds up eventually, but it does help, seem to help some.
Tell us about your floor mat. You're on a wood floor, yet you're using a floor mat.
You know, I was going to start out, and thank you for reminding me, Jim. I was going to start out by saying that, you know, there's an advantage and a disadvantage of being on the second floor. And some of the disadvantages is everything's got to come up those stairs we came up, and everything's got to go back down. So that's a disadvantage. The advantage is, obviously, I've got nice natural lighting because I'm up on the second floor with these windows and a skylight. And another advantage is I'm on a wood floor, and it's a lot more comfortable on the feet. Down below, I've got this rubber mat. I believe these were designed for horses. And it's a 1 inch thick, 3/4 inch thick maybe, rubber that I got from another guild member, I think. But I need to extend that. Obviously, I didn't have an extension when I grabbed these two pieces, but I'll need to get some more. And that puts me at just the right height for turning. And it's, you know, it's pretty comfortable. I spent a lot of time here, so it's pretty comfortable, comfortable as you can get. Another disadvantage of being on a wood floor is, you know, the stability of the lathe. So I've got it bolted to the floor, and you didn't notice downstairs, but I've got a little jog in the ceiling downstairs. And that's because I opened up the ceiling, reinforced the floor joist with LVLs. So I doubled up LVLs in this section to pick up the bandsaw and the lathe, so it goes that wide. And it helped, but it didn't solve all of it. So even though they're LVLs, you still get a little spring going. So it helps, but doesn't solve it all. So, you know, the advantage of being on a concrete floor is you're solid. But on a wood floor, you might get a little bounce when things go out of hand. Some more storage here, all pen turning stuff. Miscellaneous little blocks of wood that are going to be, you know, I got that's a mess in there. You don't want to look too far in there. Some more drawers. Again, these are all my chucks, tools in here. Again, I was learning how to make drawers with Bob Lasivita, dovetails on the bottom, slides. How do you stop a drawer? Well, they were flush at one time, but I've got stops behind this here underneath. So I learned that from, I think it was Bob Lasivita. Some more turning stuff in here. And this was really for wood storage. It still is some wood storage in there. I've got some wiring. I don't know if the cameras are going to pick this up, but my dust collector is right below this floor down below in the garage. So when I want that return air to return back, or the exhaust air to return back into the shop and make that circle, I've got a trap door on the back side of that wall there, and I've got it on pulleys. So I can open the door and let that air that's in that insulated compartment with the dust collector in there come back into the shop, get sucked back down to the intake, and then back out to the exhaust and back into this room. So, and all I got to do is wrap this around this little hook there. It'll keep that door open. So that'll keep the door open. And I just, when I'm done, I'll just unwind that and let that little trap door close. And it's a, you know, piece of styrofoam insulated thing, so it helps to keep that heat in there. So. My sharpening system, everybody's got to have one of those. So I since have to move it. I had it tucked into the heater here, but with the long-handled tools, I was hitting the back of the lathe. I actually had to move my head, the stock head, I had to move it inboard a little bit. So you can see I'm not turning all the way out to the edge. And that's because of the longer tools, when they're set on a jig, the longer tools will hit the back of the motor here. So I had to move this over some. I'm still having a problem with a couple of tools, but this is better than what it was. So I hang all the jigs here. They're color-coded for the different tools. CBN wheel on one side and a regular stone wheel on the other side.
What are the grits?
What's the grit? Jim just asked on this CBN. And I gotta be honest, I don't remember. And there is writing on that thing, but I can't see it. So let me walk over and get my glasses. What grit is that? That is 180. So 180s, and I've had this on, they say these will last a lifetime. I'm not sure whose lifetime, but I've had this on here for quite a while, and it seems to be still working fine. I've got a switch here that's connected to that dust collector, but I've hooked it up to a remote switch, which I have back there, and don't really need this switch anymore because I use the remote. So if I'm at the table saw, I can use the remote there, or if I'm at one of the other tools, I can use a remote to turn that dust collector on and off.
What do you use the left hand?
If you're shaping tools or reshaping a tool, the left hand stone works better. But this has got a little platform here, so when I'm sharpening a scraper, I'll use this platform here where I don't have a platform on this side. And on this side, it's really just made for these jigs here. So yeah, the scrapers, that little platform works good. I recently bought a platform for this that goes with this tool, but it's in the way for the jig. So I don't leave it on here. But when I turn to one side, the handle hits the edge of that jig. Tool handle comes down like this and hits that thing. So I have to take it off. I mean, I keep it in the drawer here. So it's a woodcut is the jig, and it clamps, just screws onto this here. But again, and this is adjustable, so I can adjust this in and out, maybe. Yeah, the slide doesn't work that good, but this slides in and out, and that'll adjust your platform to get it at the right height and angle. But it does get in the way with these other jigs, so I take it off. And I don't have that many tools where I need to use this platform on. I only have some of my skews and that kind of stuff. And then I created, much like, and I saw Bill Emerson, he does something very similar where I created a block to get back to zero. So if I pull this slide back out, and it's not sliding very good, and I put the block up against the end of this thing and slide it in until it hits right there, I'm back to zero for these jigs. So it's a quick adjustment. I don't have to measure anything. It's obviously I had to change it once, so I had it here for a different setting. I had to move my jig for that to fit that platform, so I had to recreate this thing.
Could you do that?
So again, this slides in and out so that I can adjust that platform. But when I want to get back to zero, I just bring that up against the end of that and slide so that the wood hits the end of this here, this slide, and I lock it in, I'm back to zero. So that works pretty good. I don't need to measure, it's back to zero with no issues at all. So how do I heat this place? I do keep it heated year-round, in winter. And this is a cabinet heater I got from my brother-in-law. And all it is, it's on my furnace, and it's got its own circulator, and it's forced hot water. is what that is. Came out of a school somewhere that was, they were, dismantling it and got rid of it and ended up here. Now, as you scan across, you'll see I got another sharpening system here. And this is one that Peter James built for me off a Harbor Freight sander. I couldn't believe the amount of pieces he took off of this thing. It was brand new. Came out of the box, we took it to a shop, and he's pulling pieces. You don't need this, you don't need that, you won't be needing this thing. I'm like, holy cats, what am I gonna need? And he proceeded to build these platforms, and this again can be used for your skews and scrapers and that kind of things. And it's got a little index here where I can use jigs on this. So if I'm on the road, I can actually use the same jig off of here and get my tools sharp. And I still use this. This has got a stop block here that's adjustable. Peter James is now making them with a slide, almost like that slide there, that slide back and forth. So I don't think he's using this block system anymore, but they're numbered here and along the side so that every tool has its own number. So if I'll pull a tool out of the cabinet here, and let's suppose I'm sharpening this one. So this is a rough and gouge, and I've got a number on it somewhere. It's 6 point, you can barely see it without glasses, 6.5. So I look for 6.5, it's back here. So, and turn that out of the way. So all I gotta do is nest that in that notch right there, and I'm at the perfect grinding angle, sharpening angle. So I still use this a lot for my spindle tools. So my bowl gouges are sharpened over there. My spindle tools are all sharpened right here off this jig. And of course these are your buffing wheel to cut down that burr on these tools. So that works pretty good. Peter James did a nice job. He still builds them, I think, and sells them, but I don't know how active he is still. This is a Jacob's chuck. So this mounts to the lathe. For those of you who don't know, let me get a wrench. So this will mount to the lathe when I'm finishing the bottom of a bowl. So I've got 3 bowls on a counter here that we haven't got to yet. Let me grab one of these just to kind of show you. But what I like about this Jacob's chuck is it's a quick adjustment. So it'll adjust to any size bowl that you can fit on here, and it'll tighten it up dead center. Now when I still have the foot on here, I'll bring the tailstock up just to pin it, and I'll get the bulk of the material off and then pull the tailstock away and finish this just the way you see it. So this is how you get the bottoms of the bowls. And I always cut this little decorative circle in there, so it's kind of like my mark. So if somebody comes to me and says, hey, I bought a bowl from you and it cracked and I want another one. Well, let me see the bottom. So I typically will note what the date and the wood type, and I have my little signature there, initials. I always initial it. So these are, in case you're wondering, these are custom bowls, a custom order, and this is mulberry. Never turned mulberry before, and it's pretty yellow. I don't know if it's going to hold this yellow color, mulberry, but and it's really pretty open grain. You can see it's got grain that looks like oak or ash. So it's got a really aggressive growth rings there. So this is a custom order that I'm working on. And back here, I've got different, this is just a piece of plywood with a thing for my chuck that I can chuck up. Again, that's how I used to flatten my rings. So I would spin this on a lathe and put up a ring up against it. So I don't really use this much anymore. This one's got a faceplate on the back and just a plain piece of wood where I've turned. And before I got that Jacobs chuck, I would take a bowl and take the tailstock and just pin it on this plywood plate to do the same thing. You know, I can't pull this tailstock away like I do on that Jacobs chuck, but that got me by for a great number of years. So that still works, but I don't use this size much anymore. Again, the same reason for that one. And you know, the Jacobs chuck will go up to, I don't remember, over 12 inches. You get over 12 inches, I'm back to using a piece of plywood. And I'll pin the larger bowl and do it that way, because the Jacobs studs just not big enough. So I've got a couple of these. One's a little bit bigger than the other. But that works in a pinch. So that's what those are for. We haven't talked about the bench. This bench I probably built, I've had this thing a long time. 45 years ago, I don't know. Leftover material from a job site, much like Bill Emerson using leftover stuff from job sites. This is a tongue and groove 2x6 that we use for a roof, to build a roof deck that was exposed underneath. Then I drilled some holes in here for some stops, put a vise on the bottom, and I've got drawers for storage. Now it isn't nailed to the floor, but it's got a lot of weight inside with all these drawers storage. I'll keep a lot of things on in this drawer for turning stuff, where I've got small tools for sanding and or cutting my yarn bowls. I use an air saw and you know, what do they call these? I don't remember. But I use these for the die grinder. Man, it's got a wood bit in here, so this die grinder works great, all pneumatic. For the yarn bowls, I keep all that small stuff up in here. And this is my main working area when I'm at the bench. I've got power at the bench, and I've also got air. I've got air coming up under the table saw, and I've got air back here with a gate. So all I can do is reach down and open up this gate here. So I haven't figured out a clever way to open and close that gate. But if you go back to the table saw, I've got a gate and ductwork that comes up under the table saw. And I've got this pull lever that I've attached to the gate. So the gate's now open. I want to close it, and I can do that with my foot. I can close that gate off when I'm using another tool. So that's pretty handy. Oh, and yeah, up on the ceiling, you'll see I have a dust collection there. What do they call these things? A dust collector that I got at Woodcraft, I think, Steel City. So, you know, when they're creating a lot of dust, that's a good way to capture some. And yeah, we didn't talk about this, did we, up here? Jim's pointing over to, you know, what's this thing hanging off the ceiling here? Well, I've got a vacuum pump. So it's a vacuum system. I've got a port here to control that, an on-off switch. So it's a little noisy, but not bad. And this is the hose that'll hook up to the lathe. Right now I've got a canning system where you could vacuum a canning jar to put your finishes in that Ron Marcoux put me onto, but this comes off and will connect to your tailstock here for a vacuum system. So that works pretty good. I don't use it that often, but it does come in pretty handy, the vacuum system. I also have a steady rest up here that's hanging. So most of you guys that are turners will know what this is. Here's one that I didn't get the dust off of. So this is what the shop normally looks like with all the dust and stuff on it. But that'll mount on the lathe like that, so it's a steady rest. You talk to John Siegel, and He doesn't really recommend these rubber wheels for steady rest, but that's what I use. I've got a metal plate mounted to my little platform here that I could, for a light. So lighting's critical when you're turning, and this is powered up. I got power up on the ceiling there. So that's powered up right there as well as my pump is. And that'll give you some nice light. And but lighting's critical. I've got this light that's, in hindsight, it's behind the lathe. If it was moved over 6 inches, it would shine light on the side I'm turning and would probably be a little helpful. I may mount a second light back here to hit this side of center. I think would work a little bit better. So I've got a roller guide here that's it's meant, designed for coming off a table saw. If you got a long stock coming off a bandsaw, I got a roller guide. I welded, I had my son weld this metal plate to the outside. And my dust collection hood has a magnet here. So that magnet will just clamp right onto here. Now the height is adjustable, and I can bring this over and tuck it right up against the bowl that I'm sanding for dust collection. I've got my ports down there. So you can see that these, this one's for the bandsaw, and I've got the one on the other side for this hose here. And I can move this around. I've got a little wedge here I put underneath it sometimes. I'll stick this underneath one of the legs so I can tip it get just the right angle kind of thing. So I can put that underneath one of the legs and kind of tip it in past the center of the lathe and get in there a little closer to sanding. So that works pretty good. Pretty pull. And I can pull this over to the workbench. So I can drag this over to here if I'm doing some sanding, and I got it twisted. I'm doing some sanding back here. I can get it a little closer to the workbench. And so if I'm standing here doing something, that dust collector will pick this up. So on the bench, I've got, like I was saying earlier, that I've got some custom orders of this mulberry. So I've got three bowls going here. I got a fourth one that is single turned. So those three are twice turned, and this one is single turned. And you can tell because it's pretty oval. So I decided to, rather than twice turn this one, I decided to leave it single turned. Trick is you got to sand it all by hand. So I'm in the process of doing that now. So those have one coat of water locks, and this one doesn't have anything on it yet. And I brought up my segmented piece. This is my latest piece that I submitted to the league exhibit this past year and won first place with. So I thought I'd bring that up. And for those of you who know me, know my work, but there are probably people that'll see this that don't know my work. So there's a good example of a segmented piece.
How long does it take to make one of those?
Jim's asking how long did it take to make one of these. This particular one is probably my most complicated piece to date, and probably took a couple of months to make.
Wow. And is the net translucent?
It is. It is translucent, and it's acrylic. So the blue you see is acrylic and is translucent. And so yeah, that took a lot of small pieces of gluing, and every layer, every row is a 1/4 inch. So when I say a 1/4 inch, the ring, so there are rings just like this, but the ring's this is 3/4, but each one of these rings is only a 1/4 inch. So for every ring, you're only building up a 1/4 each time. And every ring, like this ring, you can see has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 segments in this ring. Those rings have 36 segments on each ring. So there's 36 little pieces. Even these larger rings are still 36. And that's what makes these squares a different size because they're made for each ring. So that's why you can see this, the little segment there is still 36 segments. But the reason that's so small is because, well, it's a smaller diameter. And the pieces get bigger as the diameter gets bigger. So yeah, it's a pretty complicated piece. There's nothing special about these tools on the end of the lathe. The lathe comes with that rack, so I use it. You know, these are you know, cone centers, different size cone centers, a wrench, a knockout bar here, and a larger wrench for a faceplate. What I like about these revolving centers, when I'm taking a foot off a bowl, I'll use this one that's pretty sharp. Comes to a point, and I say sharp. They're both sharp, but this one comes to a point where this one is called a cone center. And when I'm roughing out, I'll always use this cone center. What I didn't like about this particular one was that when you go to punch it out, it knocks out the centerpiece. So I custom turned a little wood plug to fit in the bottom there so that the bar doesn't go all the way through and you can knock it out. Otherwise, you have to, when you mount it on the lathe, you know, I couldn't use the knockout bar, and maybe I could drag this over and show you. It's really a one-man shop. You get a couple people working up here and you'll be bumping each other. But this is a knockout bar out of the tailstock, and that'll just knock that out. But with this one, with a cup center, it goes right through. This is hollow. And in order to remove this, I couldn't use the knockout bar. I had to wind it all the way in to where it bottoms out. And in order for me to turn and have room for my banjo, I have to be about 2 inches extended. So it's always about 2 inches extended. So there, just bottomed out and knocks this out. But prior to putting that block in there, I had to do that. But I can leave it extended and knock it out with the bar with this little block of wood in there. So that really saved me some steps. Saved me a lot of steps. So that's the shop. Enjoy, and thank you for joining me at the shop.